every month I feel like I haven't done that much, but then when it comes to talking about it all, I realize like how many hours I've actually put into my knitting. It's crazy. Hi guys, hope you're doing well. My name is Emma and I'm going to take you through all of my knitting updates for the past month. This past month has been all over the show. I've been applying for jobs, doing job interviews. I successfully landed a job, go me. And therefore I did book myself a very, very, very last minute holiday away, which did put a little bit of a hold on some of my knitting in a way, because I did pick up a new project while I was on the plane. But today I've got a bunch of things on the needles to chat through. It might be a bit of a long one. I have like 4 jumpers to talk through, an accessory and a top. So let's start off at the top because that is my first finish item for this month. Alright, so first finish piece for this month is my twist loop top by Other Loops. That is always a mouthful, and here she is, all finished. Ignore the crease, that is from where I tucked it into my pants, and it's just left like a permanent indent on it. But yeah, this is my finished twist loop top. So a little bit about this particular piece. It is a fingering weight knit on 3mm needles. It's knit top down, and it's just knit in this all over like 3x2 rib with the cable detail that runs down the center there. Because of the nature of the top being a singlet, the yoke section is knit flat and then the body is joined and worked in the round. So you start with this one by doing a provisional cast on your shoulders. I used Judy's Magic cast on for mine, and you can see it's pretty much seamless. I'm very impressed with that. So you do your provisional cast on and you knit like your little shoulder sections, you connect them together to make a front piece, and you just continue to work that front piece down, working in some shaping for the underarm here and establishing your cable pattern down the middle. The back is done exactly the same, just sans cable. Once you've knit your front and back pieces, you join in the round, and then you just continue to knit down with your cable pattern continuing until you're happy with the length, and then you can bind off however you like. The finishing details on this one, you would pick up all of your little underarm, armhole, it's not even underarm, armhole stitches, and you do an I-cord finishing on the armhole section, and then you pick up for your neckline. Now the neckline is meant to be knit in a 1x1 rib, but you can see I did the double knit option for mine. Now for my piece, I've used Drops Flora yarn, so it is like the fingering weight equivalent of Lima, so it's 65% wool, 35% alpaca, and I've used the color number 31 sand for mine. In terms of needles, I followed the pattern, so I've used the same 3mm needles, and all the finishings were done in 2.5mm needles. I knit mine to a size large. That is one size up from what was suggested for my bust size, but I didn't want as much negative ease as the pattern called for, so knitting it in a size up would give me around about 3 centimeters of negative ease. And like looking at the sample photo with the model, like hers looks a little bit loosey-goosey, so I was really hoping to go for that kind of look, and I feel like I've kind of achieved it. I think this is a little bit fitted on the body, but I definitely feel like with wear and time, this yarn will probably stretch out and it will look really nice. So I feel like I've been able to achieve the look that I wanted to go for in terms of the bagginess of it. But yeah, mods for my piece. Now I did look at the Ravelry notes and I made a couple changes based on what a lot of people have done. So first one was that neckline. So instead of doing the 1x1 rib, I've done the double knit neckline, and I feel like that's such a smart decision to do. It just looks so much more polished, and it looks similar to like your armhole finishing. If you've got the rib, it just makes it look a little bit more, I think it's meant to be folded as well, and it just makes it seem a little bit more wintry and maybe a little bit more casual sporty vibes. I don't know, there's something about the ribbing, it just doesn't feel like it fits in with the tops, particularly since you've got like different finishing on the armholes. So having them look pretty consistent, I definitely recommend doing the double knit. I also casted on an extra 5 stitches on the shoulder, like a lot of other people have done as well, and that's meant to make it a little bit more like bra strap friendly. Now, when it comes to balancing out your stitch count so that you're still knitting to the correct size, most people end up reducing the increases that they do down here. For mine, I actually took my extra stitches from my neck cast on front and back because I needed to eliminate 10 stitches. I was knitting to a large. The medium stitch count was 10 stitches less on the neckline. So I assumed the fit was going to be fine since medium was my recommended size. So that's where I eliminated my stitches from. However, it did, because I've done the double knit neckline, there's really no stretch factor to it, and it is very, very tight. First time I put this on, like I had to really force it over my head. Now that I've like taken it on, taken it off, put it on a few times, it's loosened up a little bit to the point where it's like more easily goes on over my head, but it's still very, very tight. And like the neckline, like it sits right up on my neck. So if I was to do this again, I wouldn't take my stitches from here. I would take them from the sides there. What else did I? Oh, and my double knitting was a 7-stitch double knit neck band. I'm having a really hard time getting words out today. And I did the neck band, this one, I actually did this one on 2.25 millimeter needles instead of 2.5s because I felt like the 2.5s were looking a little bit like large, whereas the 2.25s, it just looks a little bit more in line with the existing stitches. I don't know why the stitches look more large when doing double knitting, but they did. So I just played around with my needle size for that one. The only other change I made, I knit a couple additional rows in between each of my cable twists. That was kind of by mistake, but also kind of intentional. I had a feeling that I would need to knit mine longer than what the pattern called for, so I was like, I will stretch these out by an extra couple rows. It's not going to hurt. And so I did that, but look, it doesn't really make much of a difference at all. You won't even notice it from original. And then the last change I did was just with my finishing. So I ended up doing like a folded hem. So what I did is once I kind of got down to the last few rows, I sized down into my needles and just continued to knit in pattern and just folded that and like seamed it together. I had made a mistake. Well, initially I had knit down, I forgot to size down on my needles, and then I kind of thought about it and I was like, I should probably do it in a size smaller to stop it from like flaring, because I noticed a few people said with their bind offs, whatever bind off that they use, they were like, I wish I sized down just to stop it from flaring. And I was like, I should probably do the same thing. So I did rip back and I inserted a lifeline, and having that lifeline in there made it so much easier for when you were seaming things together, because you had an even line where your lifeline was as a guide to where you should be like seaming. So there's a top tip if you were going to do a folded hem ever, before you get down to the stitches where you size down in your needles, put in a lifeline, because then when it comes to joining them together, it's going to be a little bit easier. So yeah, I did that. I don't know how I really feel about this hem. It probably needs to be a few rows longer than what it is to look nice. I feel like it looks a little bit short how it is. From a distance, I think it looks good, but in person, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how I feel. It kind of looks fine, but then it also looks a little bit like janky in some spots. So I don't know what a better bind off is for like a ribbed top. Probably just like some sort of stretchy bind off probably would have sufficed. Or another one that I've learned is Icelandic bind off recently, and that might look fine on this because it gives it a little bit of a bulgy edge, which would kind of mimic what we've got up here, like a rounded kind of edge. I don't know. Anyways, if you've got any suggestions on like better edges for ribbing, let me know. Because this is like 3x2 rib, so you can't do like Italian bind off. You have to like convert all your stitches and it's like too much effort. I just want something that was like easy to do. Anyways, I did that. So all up, this took me only 3 weeks to knit up. I did focus on it quite a lot, given that I was hoping to wear it to some job interviews, but I spent 76 hours on this particular piece. I did only use up 3 balls of yarn on this particular piece. I literally stopped at the 3rd ball because I had brought 6 balls of yarn for some particular reason when I only needed to buy 4. So when I was knitting this and I was like looking at the length and like looking at the length in like the camera here as well, it looks like it's a good length, but where you see that kind of like crease is just where my pants sit, the high-rise pants sit. So it only just tucks in, and like when I sit down it like pops out of the back, which is really annoying, so I could probably do with a little bit of extra length on it. But since I had too much yarn, I was hoping just to use half the yarn, and then I was like, maybe I can use the other half for another similar kind of singlet style top, and then I can use up all of my yarn. That was my thinking, but I have a feeling I might end up re-knitting this. So first of all, let's go through some final thoughts on like the pattern and stuff like that. The pattern itself is very easy to follow. I think it's got just the right amount of detail. It's a fairly basic top, so it's not like there was a huge amount of instructions or like technical terms or anything like that, but lists it out, gives you like stitch counts at like the right places where you need stitch count, and there was a chart for the cable. It was very easy to follow. No issues or errors or anything like that I could see in this particular pattern. The overall knit is very easy to do. I found it's not the most engaging knit. I feel like the top section goes by really, really quickly because you're knitting those like little sections and you're like piecing things together. It starts to come together quite quickly, and it's like that more potato chippy effect for the yoke section. Once you join it in the round, it becomes a little bit more tedious because it is just a bunch of ribbing, as you know, I think a lot of garments, when you get to the body section, you're just like knitting nothing for like ages. It's a little bit boring. I know a lot of people add shaping into theirs when they want a more fitted look. I don't do any additional shaping in mine, so there was nothing exciting apart from doing a cable for this entire body section. Also, all of these little trim details, incredibly tedious as well, but that doesn't take as long as you would expect it to take. So all up, I think it was fine. It was a fine knit. In terms of likes and dislikes for this particular piece, I like everything about this particular piece, if I'm being honest. There is really nothing I dislike about this. I like the fabric, the colour, the overall look of the piece, everything about it I really, really like. However, there are some things I would change. And the reason I would change these is more so because of the purpose that I made this top. I made this top in mind, like I wanted it to be like a work top. So I want to be able to wear this top tucked into some nice trousers and not have to wear a blazer over the top of it. In its current state, I don't feel super comfortable wearing it without something covering my shoulders, because this bit here, it does tuck in just a little bit too much on me. Now, I'm quite broad-shouldered, so this might not be the same problem for everyone, but I do wish I casted on more stitches for my shoulders to make them a little bit wider, because currently it's only just like bra strap friendly, like you can see a little bit poking out, but I just feel like the cut-in is a little bit too much for the workplace. I really like the look of this top and the cut-in and everything else about it, but not as a work top. As like a casual everyday top or something like that, it's perfect. But for the office, I feel like it's a little bit too much. So if I was to make this again, which to be honest, because I want it to be a work top, I may actually end up ripping this back and re-knitting it, which the thought of doing that is like painful, but at the same time, like, I want it to work. So yeah, if I do end up knitting this again, I think I would just do another, like, so 10 stitches total across the shoulder, and I won't eliminate my stitches from the neckline. I will leave the neckline as intended for size large, and I would eliminate from the extra stitches just from the increases on the side here. So that means that this overall shoulder will be like wider all the way down to like here, and I think that will look like a lot better for the office and like the intent of like how I want to wear this particular top than it is currently. And by removing the stitches from this arm instead of this neckline, it means this neckline is going to be a little bit wider, because I definitely stick to this double knit neckline again. But like I said, it's super duper tight. It's not uncomfortably tight, like it's noticeably tight. Like I notice it, but I'm not like all the time, you know what I mean? So having it a little bit wider would just make it so much more comfortable, and then it would be more appropriate for like work, having that slightly wider shoulder covering, or just having this bit covered a little bit more. And then the length, I would definitely knit a little bit more on the length of this particular piece, just so that it stays like tucked in at the back. I might even, if I had knit the cables, like the gaps to the right amount to the pattern, it's only a couple rows, but I could possibly get in a fourth cable. I just have to kind of think about how much length I want to add on and how those cables are going to like space out to whether or not I want to put 4 cables in or stretch out my 3 a little bit more, because this gap down here is basically the 4th cable would start like right here. If I was to like knit any more length, that would be where the 4th cable would start. So some considerations for next time. Yeah, I'm in two minds of whether or not I should just keep it as is, wear a blazer. I mean, we are in winter at the moment, so I can definitely get away with still wearing it a couple times. But yeah, ultimately, I would like to wear it as a standalone piece without a blazer, or at least be able to take off my blazer in case it's a bit like warm in the office or something like that. I want to be able to take it off and not be like, oh, scandalous, so much shoulder showing. Like, you know what I mean? Even though we're pretty casual in the office these days, but at the same time, I don't know. I might be the only one on that one. Anyways, let's move on to some whips. Alright, first whip that I've got is actually a new cast on, and this was a project that I wanted to take with me as my like travel project. So I needed something that was like small, portable, like easy to work on the plane. You know, I didn't have much space or weight in my bags. So we brought back our Smith gloves. If you have watched any of my earliest knit update videos, you will know that I had a lot of issues with casting these on in the past. I just really struggled with the deep ends and knitting in the round, and I was getting like major laddering, and I couldn't get it to look nice. So I've now picked them up and we've got them. They're happening. So these are the Smith gloves. They are a free pattern by Sunny Kambacher. It is a fingering weight knit on 3mm needles. The glove is knit from like the bottom up. It's all knit in the round in a like 3x3 rib. It's a really simple construction actually. You just cast on, you knit your rib for a section. Once you get up to like this, I guess where the hand portion is meant to start, you start doing some like increases and decreases to get this cool like pattern happening here, and some additional increases just for the thumb section. Once you've done all the increases, you separate off your thumb section. I think you do one more set of increases and decreases, which is just for this hand section, and then you just continue to knit the rib plain up until you're happy with the length, and then just bind off, pick up your little thumb stitches, knit a couple rounds, and then bind off for your thumb. And then you would do the second glove, which is like a mirror of this glove. So you can see how like these, whatever they are, decreases on that side. I don't know. This pattern goes this way, right? So it will mirror on this hand is where I was going with that. So I've knit mine on using this Temu yarn that I have lying around. So this is meant to be 70% merino, 20% nylon, 10% silk in the color 02 black. This is like, I don't know what weight this yarn is meant to be. I would say it's a fingering or light fingering, but when I knit with it with one strand on 3mm, it just doesn't look that great. So I ended up holding it double and I sized up in my needles to 3.5mm needles for this particular piece. Now, I have knit these a few times. As you can see, I'm already holding 2 gloves here. These are all left-hand gloves, and I did knit up to here previously as well. So this glove has been made a few times and still, I don't know what it is about this pattern, but like the amount of times that I have like casted it on, re-knit it and done everything, like my God, when I actually get the second glove done, I'm going to be like, let's throw a freaking party. But basically on my plane ride I went to Kuala Lumpur and then I went down to Singapore and then I flew home from there. So I had plenty of transit time in order to knit. I really only ended up knitting on the flight to KL because it was the longest flight and it was like a daytime flight. So I got a good amount done. I got up until you separate for the thumb done, and that one I was knitting 2 patterns. So I knit size small and I knit it in a 3x3 rib. Once I got up to separating for the thumb, I got a little bit confused with the pattern. I'll touch on it in a second. But overall, the glove was just coming out way too big. So once I got to my hotel, I ended up ripping it back and I cast it on and started again. But in order to reduce my stitch count, I wasn't sure where I should eliminate stitches from in order to keep this kind of like pattern looking right. So I ended up just doing 2x2 rib instead of 3x3 rib. So that reduced my stitch count by like a third. So you meant to cast on, I think it was 60 stitches for the large, and I ended up just casting on 40 stitches. And so I still followed all the steps, but I was just doing 2x2. Because I'm only doing 2x2, it does mean that I've done less rounds in total for like all of the increase sections, because you would normally, when you're doing each set of increases, there's like 3 for the knits, 3 for the purls, whereas I've just done 2 for knits, 2 for purls. So I do technically have less rows here, but then because my gauge is off and everything, I feel like it's kind of worked out fine anyways. So I don't know, I'm not mad at that. So yeah, I ended up knitting size large in a 2x2 rib. Other than that, I think the only other mods, not really mods, they're just preferences because it doesn't give you any instructions in terms of like cast on and bind off, but I did stretchy cast on and I did the Icelandic bind off on this particular one here. I don't know if I love it because it looks a little bit more bulky than my like cast on edge. So on my second set, and I'll explain why I've done a second left hand glove here in a second, but I think I'll do just like a standard stretchy bind off instead of the Icelandic bind off. I think the Icelandic bind off does look nice. I found it really hard to do with this particular yarn because it is black and it's tiny stitches and I'm holding 2 strands together and it's just like this, like it's quite a woolly looking like yarn, and it's just, it was really hard to like pick up and like tuck through the stitches properly and things like that. So I ended up using a crochet hook to do it on my one, but I think I might just do a standard stretchy bind off on my next set. I also might do a couple more rounds just to lengthen the hand just by a smidge, and I'm definitely going to do more rows on my thumb. I didn't actually end up counting my rows on the thumb, but I think it was only meant to be like 6 rounds or something like that. I'm not sure how many rounds I ended up doing on mine. I probably didn't do 6 because mine is very, very short, so I'll definitely make my thumb a bit longer on the second glove. All up in terms of like time spent on these gloves, I don't actually know because I haven't been tracking it accurately. I know that my flight to KL was around about 8 hours or just over 8 hours, and I pretty much knit the entire flight. So the first one I got up to separating for the thumbs was about 8 hours, but then reducing my stitch count when I did it the second time, like I knit this entire glove apart from the bind off and the thumb. I did that when I got home, but the rest of it I knit whilst I was just like hanging out in my hotel rooms. I didn't actually end up knitting any other transit times. I ended up sleeping for the rest of the transit times. So it was pretty quick all up, but I don't know how many hours I spent on it. I probably, on this new glove, I've knit this just every now and then, and I've spent maybe like over the last 3 or 4 days working on this particular piece, and I've only got like a couple extra rows to do here, and then I need to pick up all my thumb, which is, the stitches are like hidden in here because it's inside out at the moment. So I'm going to say like 4 days per glove is generous time to get these done. Now, thoughts on the pattern. So as I mentioned before, there was a little bit of confusion when you get to separating for the thumb. Aside from this confusion, I would say the pattern is pretty good and crystal clear, and it's a free pattern, so that's like fantastic. Now, when you get up to the point of separating for the thumb, you're basically doing like increases and decreases to create this like thing and to create extra stitches for your like thumb area here. So it tells you to do what the steps are, right? So it gives you like round 1 to 6 or whatever, because that's all of your increases and decreases that you need to do. And then it says repeat rounds 1 and 6 2 times. So I read that as just doing 12 rounds total. But what it really means is do it 2 more times. So on this glove, when I got up to, like when I was doing my first one and I had to separate my stitches, the stitch counts weren't like aligning. So it doesn't actually give you a stitch count in it. It just tells you how many thumb stitches to separate off. And then after you separate the stitches, it's like, oh, you should be like purling 2 and then doing your knit 2 together. And that wasn't aligning on my glove. I had a bunch of extra stitches before I would have reached that purl 2 knit 2 together. And then I remember reading on someone else's page that they were like, oh, there's an error in the pattern and you should be knitting a chunk before doing that purl 2 knit 2 together. Turns out that girl is wrong. The pattern is actually right. But it's just not clear that you should be actually doing one more set of increases and decreases before separating for your thumb. So basically, if you are knitting this glove, this entire hand section, the stitch count shouldn't change, and you're doing additional increases for the thumb section. So when it comes to separating out the stitches for the thumb, the stitches left for the hand should be the same as whatever you casted on, and your cast off and cast on stitch count should be the same. Hopefully that makes sense for anyone who's making this. So when you get to repeating your increases and decreases, it's 2 more times after you've done the written out instructions. That's my only tip on this particular piece. Otherwise, it's a fairly straightforward pattern. I wouldn't say it's like the best fitting glove, but then I've also fucked this one up, so maybe that's why. This one, I followed the instructions properly, so I'm hoping this one turns out as a better fit. This glove, I did knit on my wood DPNs because I didn't want to take metal needles on the plane. I didn't know if they would be allowed or not. I had no issues, by the way, with security checking anything. But I did knit with wood DPNs for this one. This one I'm knitting on metal needles. And I will say, knitting on metal needles, my knitting's definitely a bit tighter. I've noticed this as I've tried this on. I can't try it on now because I've got like my thumb stitches on these like massive cable needles and it's all like inside out. But I did notice that this is actually coming out a lot tighter than this glove, which does concern me just a smidge because the fit of this one is a little bit weird. You can see it's like very stretched out, like all of the bits here are like quite stretched out. So it's really like kind of loose down here and it fits fine like up here, but like across this bit, it's quite tight. And I think it's just because I haven't added in, like I've deducted one set of like increases and decreases. So I should have basically 2 extra ribs, so 4 additional stitches is where I'm getting it on this particular section across here. And so hopefully that one fits a little bit better. But I'd say the fit at the moment, it's fine, but it feels a little bit weird, but it's fine. But that's my Smith gloves. All right, so next what we've got is my Zipper Sweater Light by Petite Knit. So this is the DK weight version of the Zipper Sweater, and it's knit on 4mm needles. Here is what mine is looking like so far. So last time I think I was still flat knitting. I was only like up to maybe like here-ish. So we've made a bit of progress this past month. Before I go into all the details, I'll tell you a little bit about the construction of this particular piece. It's a fairly simple top-down raglan style knit and all-over stockinette stitch. When it comes to casting this one on, you do a provisional cast on using Judy's Magic Cast On. For the collar, you basically knit a big square of ribbing and then you fold that and seam it together. The Judy's Magic Cast On just gives a super seamless, lovely join there. I love that technique. It's like my new favorite technique. Well, it's not even new to me anymore. I think I've said that for the last like 4 or 5 months now. That is my favorite technique for folding. So you do your Judy's Magic cast on. Once you connect it together, you then start to establish your yoke section. So you're starting to work raglans whilst doing short rows at the same time to get some shaping on the back. And you just continue to knit down flat until you reach the right depth for your zipper. Once you reach that particular point, you join in the round and you continue to knit down until your yoke depth is the right length, and then you separate for body and sleeves. Knit the body down, plain old stock knit, till you reach the side length, finish off the 1x1 ribbing. Same for the sleeves, you just pick up the stitches. You do knit some gradual decreases down the sleeve to give a little bit of a tapered effect, and then you just finish with 1x1 ribbing once you're happy with the length. Lastly, you then have to install your zipper. So there's a little few stitches on hold here. So you actually knit a little bit of a facing to create a really nice, like each side to the, like where the zipper is installed. And then you just sew the zipper in between like the facing and the actual piece to finish it. So for my piece, this is knit using a Tiwu yarn, so it's meant to be 100% cashmere, and it's in the color number 37 coffee. I'm holding it double along with the supporting cotton that it comes with, so this is absolutely identical to my already finished zipper sweater light that I made as a gift knit. The only difference is that I'm adjusting the size a little bit. So I'm still using 4.5mm needles for this one, which is one size up from what the pattern calls for. And for mine, I'm making this in a extra large, which should give me around about 23 centimeters of positive ease. The only modification that I made to mine was I actually knit the collar to the largest size, and then I established my yoke, and then I knit down until my stitch count reached the extra large stitch count. The reason why I did that is because I found on my gift knit, now I initially cast it on my gift knit as a medium. I did change it throughout as I knitted it, but I found the collar was extremely tight. And as you go up in sizes, the collars are the same for 2 or 3 sizes, and then it goes up a few stitches, but it doesn't jump very dramatically. And because the medium, it was super snug, I think the large was only a couple stitches more. And this is the bigger size, and it's only 8 stitches larger than the extra large calls for, which to balance, I just eliminated 1 increase round from all my raglans, because that would be 8 stitches. So that's how I kind of just counterbalanced the stitch count. So yeah, that's the only modification that I've done to mine, because I'm knitting off gauge as well. I have made the depth of my zipper a lot deeper than what the pattern calls for. The pattern will tell you to knit X amount of rows, you install the zipper, and if you've got extra length on your zipper, they tell you to cut the zipper. So I don't want to cut my zipper because I went out of my way to buy the correct length zipper as called for in the pattern, which you totally don't need to do, by the way. If you're making this, buy whatever fuck size zipper you want or you can get your hands on, and you just knit the gap to suit your zipper. And if you have super long zipper, you can cut it if you want, but I don't want to cut my expensive petite knit specific zipper if I didn't need to. So I just knit this longer than intended. To get the yoke depth a little bit more as well, I did space out my raglans. So if you remember my gift knit, I ended up knitting a few additional rounds after I finished all my raglan increases on that one too, to get a little bit more depth. In hindsight, I probably didn't need to do that particularly for the recipient that received it, but I kind of measured that, and I wanted mine to be a similar measurement because I think it looked fine on me. So I just was measuring this by centimeters, and I was like, oh no, I definitely want to start spacing mine out a little bit towards the end, just to get a little bit more length on the yoke to make it a little bit deeper. So I started spacing my raglans out with 2 knit rounds in between. So that it doesn't have a harsh stop like it did on my other one. It kind of gradually fades out instead. So I feel like that just looks a little bit nicer than if you just do them as per pattern and then you stop and you just knit extra fabric, if that makes sense. I don't have a photo, I don't think, of the cutoff on the raglan, but I might have some prior footage, I don't know. Anyways, so aside from that mod and those changes, since I last picked it up, I have now effectively separated body and sleeves, as you can see there. I've only just done that. I've now I need to wind up some more yarn so I can continue knitting this down. I think I'll probably pick up the sleeve and start working on the sleeves instead of the body. And I might knit in the facing and do the zipper somewhat soon as well, just because that's more tedious. Installing the zipper isn't hard, but it is fiddly. So if I can get that out of the way, I kind of want to, but then at the same time, it adds weight to your piece, so it's kind of annoying when you're working length to have a heavy top part. So I don't know, I kind of want to get it done, but at the same time I'm like, maybe I'll leave it to the end. All up, I've spent another 20 odd hours on this since last time, so we've spent 38 hours on this piece so far, all up. And that is my zipper sweater. All right, next whip, guys. This, I don't even know why I'm putting it on a coat hanger. She's so small. This has been an absolute journey of a piece. She's testing me. She's testing me. So this is my Arctic Light sweater by Kuto Vakika. It calls for a DK plus a lace or mohair. It says equals DK, so you could probably just use a single strand if you really wanted to. It's meant to be knit on 5mm needles for the body, and ribbing details are meant to be knit on a 3mm needle. In terms of construction for this girly here, well, as you can see, she is knit top down. It is a raglan style again, with this all over like texture and cables. The piece is entirely worked in the round for this particular one. So you start by, she instructs you to cast on and knit a big chunk of collar, which you will fold and seam down later. Once you've done your collar, you move on to working your yoke, where you start establishing all of your cable patterns whilst doing your raglan increases. The increases on this one are done every single round. And you basically continue to knit down. You stop your increases at a certain point and then just continue to knit the yoke until you reach the right depth. Once you reach that depth, you separate your body and sleeves, cast on a few additional stitches for your underarms, continue to work the body, following the charts for the body section until you're happy with the length. Finish off with some 1x1 rib. It's twisted rib, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. Twisted rib for all the ribbing details. And then for the arms, you just maybe pick up and knit in the sleeve pattern until you're happy with the length. Finish off in your 1x1 ribbing, and then, like I said, she instructs you to like fold down and knit the collar down last, but who's doing that? So for my piece, for my piece, I'm using the Bendigo Woollen Mills Whisper 8-ply yarn, which is merino wool. I believe it is superwash. It's in the color 2512 Champagne, and I am holding that together with a strand of Drops Kid Silk yarn, which is 75% mohair, 25% silk, and that is in the color number 20 Light Beige. Now, in terms of needles and sizing, this is where we started to make some changes on this. So initially I cast it on and used 5.5mm needles in order to meet gauge. And I was knitting to a size large. Now, last time I had knit the entire yoke, decided that it was entirely too large, blocked it, it's too large, the sleeves are way too big. So I ripped back half of my yoke to reduce the sleeve stitch count to a size medium, and I started knitting on with the yoke again, and I was like, I don't know, I'm just not that happy with the gauge. There were a few other little things that I was like, maybe I could tweak, and so I was on the fence to whether or not I should rip back my yoke and start again. And well, like you can see, she's a lot smaller than last time, so I did indeed rip back the yoke and start again. So I have spent on this a total of 91.5 hours, and this is all we have, 91.5 hours. It's about 20 more hours since last time. So since last time, yeah, I ripped it back. I had to wash all of my yarn, let it dry, do all that jazz, and then I have reworked the yoke again. So the changes that I have made, I first of all have sized down and am now using a 5mm needle. So that is the same as what the pattern does call for, but Kuto Vikika's knits, her gauge is like quite loose, so my gauge is a lot tighter now than what the pattern actually calls for. But I mean, the gauge is super hard to measure on this piece, and so I don't know. To say that I'm on or off gauge is like a bit of a stretch. So I am going to continue to knit this same as what I kind of was going to do last time. So I'm going to knit the sleeves to the medium stitch count and the body to the large stitch count. Now last time I did feel like my body was getting a little bit too big, but because I'm sized down on my needles now, I feel like we might be okay. The sleeves, we'll play it by ear. Once I hit the medium stitch count, we'll pause, we'll try it on, see how it's fitting, and like if I need to add some more to it, I can add some additional increases. That's not the end of the world. So those are the main changes that I've done in sizing. I did do my short rows a little bit differently second time around. So a lot of the instructions, they were wrap and turn short rows, and I did German short rows first time, and I don't think they necessarily looked bad, but they didn't look the greatest, and so I did do wrap and turns this time. I also started my short rows a little bit later than I did last time, so I was hoping by starting them a little bit later, so I did one cable twist and then I started my short row shaping. So I still did the same number of short rows that I did in the first time. I just did them one row or two rows, I'm not sure, later than what the common instructions are. The common instructions are you knit 2 rows flat and then you start your short row shaping. And I just changed that a little bit, and to be honest, I don't like how it looks. I do not like how this front cable looks. You can see there's like a very obvious bit of flat knitting that I've done here before I've started my cables. So the cable just still looks really wonky and not that great at the start. So ultimately, I think if you are doing short rows on this particular piece, avoid doing them in the center cable section, and then I think it will just turn out much better. You might have to do a little bit more thinking to make sure that your twists are in the right places, but this, it's stretched out and it looks really weird. When I put it on paper, the twists in the center here are the right number of rows in between, but then there's extra length on these outer sections here. So I don't know, I might be able to make it look a little bit better by maybe just pinching in a stitch or something every now and then. I don't know, I might just have to play around with it when I block it and do something, because I don't like the look of it. I don't know if it looks better or worse than it did first time around, but I'm really not happy with how that front cable looks. I'm looking at it in the camera from a distance and I actually don't think it looks that bad, but close up it looks bad. So yeah, in terms of wrap and turns versus German short rows, I don't think either or looks any better or worse than the other one. I can quite clearly see where all of my short rows are on this particular piece. I could see them quite obviously when I did them first time around as well. So I don't know, pick whatever style you prefer in terms of that one. What else have I done differently this time? Cables. So one of the things I really disliked about my last piece is that this particular cable here didn't start until this one down here. So this whole section here was just plain stock knit, and it was quite obvious that you could see the stock knit section from a distance, and I don't know, I just didn't really like the look of it. My eye was drawn to it because it's such a textured piece. Having that plain stock knit chunk, it just really attracted your eye, and so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to rip it back, because I was like, oh, I can put some half cables in there, they will fit, and that's what I've done this round, and it looks 100% better. I'm so glad that I did this. So I basically got 2 full whatever leaning way cables these are. Got 2 full ones on the side. This little one here is actually just a 2x2 twist, because I had to then cast on the stitch. So if you look really closely, you can see that I like this little column here actually sits on like the outside, so it kind of looks like part of it, but it's actually sitting separately versus the one that looks down. You can see that column like tucks up and under from here. So, I mean, you can't really see that minor detail, but ultimately this looks so much better than it did before, so I'm super glad that I did that. I also ended up changing the direction of like these twists here so that they mirror each other. So one's a left and one's a right, whereas before I just followed the pattern where they both go like whatever direction they go. So I changed that as well. So ultimately, I'm still not happy with the short row shaping and the front cable. I think that looked no better, no worse than what I did in first attempt. Cables look way better, overall texture and like gauge and gapiness of this, although I feel like I still need to reblock it to get the true effect of it, but I feel like sizing down on my needles was definitely the right decision. So ultimately, I am much happier with how this is looking versus version 1. So I'm upset that I ended up ripping it back the whole thing, but at the same time, like, I'm not mad because I feel like the results are being better second time round on this one. It's definitely like getting really cold now. Like I don't know if it's just because I've come back from like really hot weather where I was like sweating every single day to like ice cold weather, but it feels like winter's really like hitting right now. So I would love the flat to be like more finished so that I know that I'm actually going to be able to wear it this season, but with its current state and now that I'm going back to work, I don't know if I'm going to get it finished in time to actually wear this year. But we'll see, we'll see. Right, next one, we're so much more closer to being finished than our Arctic Lights. So next up, this is my Colette pullover, patterned by Sari Nordlin. It's meant to be a light fingering plus a lace weight, which should equal a DK weight. So you can either knit fingering plus mohair, or you can knit with the DK weight. And it's meant to be knit on 3.5mm needles, and all the trim details are meant to be done in a 3mm needle. Now, construction for this one, very quickly, it's knit top down. It is in a dropped shoulder construction, so it does mean that you knit the yoke sections flat and then you join everything together and start working in the round. So to start for this one, you actually start on the back and you knit the kind of back trapezoid, I'm pretty sure that's the right shape name, piece in pattern. You then pick up along the shoulder back seam here and knit your shoulder piece for each side, doing some shaping for like the neckline. You then connect those two front shoulder pieces together to create your front panel. Your back and front should marry up in terms of length, and that's when you join them together in the round, and you continue to knit your body down until you're happy with the length, and then you finish off with some 1x1 ribbing. You then pick up for your, again, just knitting to the right length and then finishing off in 1x1 ribbing for that. Now for my piece, I have used Drops Extra Fine Merino yarn, so it's 100% superwash merino, and it is in the color number 06, which depending what website you look at was either brown or taupe. I don't think it is really brown or taupe. I'd say it is a good old grey, but let's say it's more taupe than it is brown, that's for sure. Anyways, I've knit mine on 4.5mm needles, and I've kind of custom my size to get between 4 and 5. So this is a size 4.5. I've gone through all of my complaints around the sizing and the gauge and everything in prior videos, so I'm not going to go over it again. Since last time, I've spent about another 20 hours on this particular piece, so we've spent 120 hours on this total. And I did run out of yarn on this. So I basically just continued to knit down until I ran out of yarn. I blocked my piece and then I kind of just guesstimated based on, like I put a little pin on so I knew how many kind of rows that I would get like per ball of yarn, and then just kind of guesstimated how much more yarn to buy. Ordered that before I went away and it's just arrived. So I picked this up and I've knit a little bit more on the bottom here. I've already gone through one additional ball. I just need to do the eyelets here and then I'll move on to the ribbing, and then I just need to finish off my sleeves, but I just need to decide on what length I want to knit my sleeves to. This, like I say, it's majority of this is blocked minus this little section on here, but I am a little bit concerned that the size is going to be too big. Like this is like heavy. This is weighing on my arm, man. And the yarn consumption on this is much more than any other project that I have done or that I have on my like wish list or anything like that. So it kind of concerns me of how much yarn I'm putting into this, because I'm just concerned that it's going to suddenly like grow and be like way too big. And if it is way too big, I'm going to be inclined to rip it back and knit it again. But with the 4 additional balls that I ordered, that brings the total consumption for this project to 15 balls of yarn. So I'm pretty sure they're around about 100 meters each. So that's 1,500 meters for this particular piece. And I feel like that's more than it should be. It's more than like what's quoted for my Arctic Light sweater. But in saying that, that's not on different needles. So I don't know. I don't know if I should be concerned or not. Like when I tried this on, it seems to fit like pretty well. But I'm just concerned because it is superwash, it's just going to like stretch out over time. And because it is so like heavy, I feel like just with the weight of the sleeves constantly pulling down, the shoulder's just going to keep dragging down and it's going to end up just being like a little bit too big. So we'll see, but I am excited to at least have a sweater that is almost near completion, because like winter has hit. I've come back and it is cold. So yeah, I'm excited to have something warm that I can put on. Although this is not like very warm wool. I feel like this, to the touch, this kind of feels like cold. I talked about this in like some other video and I was like, the Bendigo wool Woolen Mills is also a superwash merino, so they're more or less like for like. But that one feels like any other wool that you touch. Like it's, as soon as you touch it, it kind of feels warm to the touch, whereas this kind of feels like cold to the touch. It does warm up, like as it sits on my lap and whatnot, like it definitely warms up, but I don't know, this, I don't know if it's something to do with the superwash treatment or like what, but it's like a cooler wool yarn. So, and it does have holes in it as well, so it's, if it's a windy day, it's maybe not the bestest jumper to be wearing, or the warmest jumper to be wearing, but it'll be good for like maybe like in the office where it won't be like too hot. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how much wear I get out of it. But I love the color and everything like that. I'm just a little bit concerned around the fit. And yeah, that is my Colette pullover. She should hopefully be a finished piece next time. I'm really going to focus on just like finishing her, because we're so close. We're so close. We're almost there. All right, and last whip, yet another jumper. Oh my god, the sweaters right now are just like sweatering. There's so many of them. Next, I'm going to go through a phase of cardigans. I've just brought a bunch more. I brought a bunch more yarn. It was because I had to buy some more of that like drops yarn. I kind of wanted to like maximize my order, and so I brought a bunch more yarn. I literally maximized my order. I brought a bunch more yarn, and all the projects I brought yarn for are like cardigans. So I'm kind of like, do I put one of my jumpers aside and work on a cardigan just to keep it a little bit different from like working in the round to like working flat? Because man, having like multiple projects where I'm just going to be like working flat constantly is not going to be fun, because basically all the yarn I've got in my collection now is for cardigans. So get ready for cardigans. Anyways, next whip that I've got is another sweater. This was a bit of a spontaneous cast on. Like I said, I brought some more yarn. I brought the drops yarn, and I also brought some other yarn. So this project, there's not much of it at the moment, but this is the Weekend Glow sweater by Julia Prio. I'm not sure how to say her surname. Calls for, it says DK worsted, but it's, the sample is knit in like drops Lima and whatnot, which they also call the like DK worsted, but I would say it's DK weight. I don't know. And it's meant to be knit on 4mm needles for the body, and then the ribbing sections are meant to be knit on 3.5mm needles. In terms of construction for this particular piece, this is a super basic raglan, so it is knit to top down, raglan seam, and it's done in a 5x1 like broken rib, and the entire piece is knit in the round. So you cast on however you like, you knit some 1x1 ribbing for your collar, you then move on to establish your 5x1 rib whilst doing some raglan increases at the same time. The increases on this one are a little bit different to like other sweaters that I've worked, whereby she instructs you to do them like every single round for the first few rounds. You then do them like normally like every other round for a little while, and then towards the bottom, or when you're finishing your yoke, you start doing them every single round again. So your shoulder's going to be shaped a little bit like this, I think is the goal with that. But yeah, once you've done all your raglans, you then separate body and sleeves. You just continue to knit the body down until you're happy with the length, continuing with your ribbed pattern. Finish with your 1x1 ribbing on the bottom, and then you pick up your sleeves, knit them in the round in the continued rib pattern until you're again happy with the length. Finish with a 1x1 rib on your cuff. There is also some shaping. There's no sleeve decreases, but there is some shaping she gets you to do before you separate your body and sleeves. So she instructs you basically before you separate, you just knit back and forth flat for a section across the back to add in a section of fabric and lift the back a little bit. So that's the kind of shaping for this particular piece. Now for my piece, I'm using Bendigo Woolen Mills Whisper 8 ply. Again, same as what I use for my Arctic lights. It's 100% merino. I'm pretty sure it's superwash, and this one is in the color 2511 coal, aka black. I'm so happy to be knitting like a black sweater. Oh my gosh, it brings me so much joy, but I'm not gonna lie. Since we are getting into winter season, it does get dark very, very early, and I'm struggling to knit on this in the evenings. As soon as it gets a little bit too dark, it's just like hard to see my stitches, even with the lights like on, unless I have a light directly on my work. I find it really hard to like see. But yeah, I'm otherwise knitting this the same needles as the pattern calls for, which is a 4mm. I'm pretty much on gauge for mine, which is nice. And I'm knitting mine in a size medium. It should give me 9 centimeters of positive ease. In terms of modifications for mine, I've made a lot of modifications. So first things first, I did do a tubular cast on for my neckline. I don't know if you're going to be able to really see that. I did initially do like a twisted rib neckline, but it looked really weird with the tubular cast on. There must be another way to do it if you want to do a twisted rib, but I wasn't going to like investigate it. I just wasn't digging the twisted rib, so I started again a couple times basically on this collar. And I just ended up just doing normal 1x1 ribbing, which actually I think looks fine. And because it's in black, you can't really like see the ribbing that clearly anyways. So I did different cast on. I also casted on more stitches than what's specified in the pattern. So initially I did follow the pattern in terms of cast on stitches, and it was just looking hella small. So I decided to adjust my stitch count. So I basically looked at the pattern. So once you finish your ribbing, there's like a setup round where in most sizes you end up doing like quite a few increases, and I think that's so that your pattern establishes like nice and evenly. So I basically took the stitch count for the like established for that setup round, but for a size large. And the reason I picked the large is because the medium and the large follow the same instructions for a lot of the yoke sections, so it means their placement or like how you do your increases, I don't know what I'm trying to say. The instructions were kind of like the same for those two, so I just basically adjusted my stitch count. So I casted on 104 stitches to give myself a much wider neckline than what the pattern called for. I also didn't want to do the kind of shaping specified in the pattern where you knit back and forth on the back section before separating for body and sleeve. I instead swapped that out for German short rows. So I worked my German short rows as I was doing my raglans at the very, very start in order to raise the back a little bit. I don't know if you can really, it's hard when there's not that much fabric on the piece to actually know whether it's sitting higher or not, but you can see my back sitting a little bit higher than the front is. So I feel like I achieved what I wanted to achieve there. So I did that because I have removed the section of fabric towards the back and I've adjusted my cast on stitch count. I did have to do quite a bit of math to make sure that my stitch counts were going to like even out and make sure that my sleeves and my body came to the right stitch counts at the end. So there was a lot of thinking that I had to do at the start of this. What else did I do differently? My raglans, I have just done standard raglan increases every other round. I haven't done the sections where you do them every single round, and that's mainly because, again, I've adjusted my like stitch counts and things like that. So I wanted to make sure I got as much depth as possible. So I didn't want to eliminate rounds kind of unnecessarily. So I just did standard raglans on mine. Now, so where I'm up to on mine is I'm now ready to separate the body and sleeves, but like I've locked this and I don't know, I feel like she's not looking big enough to be separating at this particular point. Like I've tried it on and I feel like it's going to be okay, but at the same time I'm like probably going to be a little bit more fitted than I anticipated it to be. So I'm really in two minds to whether or not like I trust the pattern and follow it, or if I add some more to it, particularly like the depth. Like this is not a very deep yoke. That really concerns me. But then I did widen my neckline, and to be honest, now that I've blocked this and when I try it on, I'm like, oh, the neckline's a little bit more open than I maybe want it to be. It's definitely not like too open at this stage, but when you add the weight of the sleeves, that might change. But like if I look at the pattern, like everyone's necklines are like quite like fitted up here, and I kind of like the look for this particular piece, but if it's overall like a fitted jumper. So I'm kind of like, did I maybe make a mistake by casting on more stitches? I don't know, but like I've got like this much yarn left, so if I knit down on the body and then maybe pick up one sleeve, I'll have a really good idea of fit with that much extra fabric on it, and that might be enough for me to make a decision whether or not I continue or I rip back and just start it again, and then I'll know what modifications to make after that. So I don't know, I'm just every single piece I feel like lately is just the sizing is just, I can't seem to get it right. I couldn't get my Colette pullover right. I've redone that like so many times, and then like my Arctic lights, I've had to redo that, and now I'm probably going to end up redoing this sweater as well, it seems. The only one that's working out is my zipper sweater, and that's because I already made one. But yeah. Anyways, I have rambled on for several hours at this particular point. This was going to be a really, really quick update. I was hoping to get like 3 videos done, but the sun is now setting and we are running out of daylight. So that is all of my updates for this month. I have a feeling, well, actually, I don't have a feeling. I know that like progress is going to dramatically decline because I'm going back to full-time work as of tomorrow. So everything is just going to take a lot longer, but I think in terms of finished pieces for next month is going to be the Colette pullover, and my Smith gloves should be done minimum, and then I think I just need to pick one of my jumpers to work on and just really like hone in on one piece at a time, I think is the way to go at the moment. But yeah, that's everything for this month, guys. So I hope you enjoyed all of the updates. Let me know what you guys are working on, and yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one. I'm only like 3 items and I've already been talking for like over an hour at this point, so I need to speed things up. Oh my god, I cannot get this look out. There we are. Yeah, so making the top was motivating me to apply for jobs, and then finishing, does that even make sense? I don't know. Anyways, this was a 7-stitch double, what am I saying? This was a this was alright, I gotta speed this up. So I just literally was like Melbourne to anywhere. I'm just trying to put this on. I'm not sure which hand I've actually knitted. Like, what am I saying? Oh, she's heavy. Oh my god.